Welcome to the NBA 2K G League show. I'm your host, Varun Chari, and welcome to the show. So we are going to get straight into this video and talk about how this Kevin Durant trade affects the Rio Grande Valley Vipers. So obviously we saw Durant got traded to the Rockets for Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks, the 2025 first round pick from the Rockets, which was the number 10 pick, and also the second round pick that the Rockets had, which I believe was 59th in this draft. And then they also trade away some second round picks for the future to the Phoenix Suns. Now, look, how this affects Rio Grande. So let's talk about what they lost in this trade, the Rockets. They lost a guy in Jalen Green who can really score the ball, and then you also lost a good defender in Dillon Brooks. And you get that back in KD, a guy who can score, a guy who can defend. I think here's the thing, though. KD is on the higher end of his 30s. We've seen he's been injured the past few years at times. And, I think that is something you have to monitor when you look at depth. And if you're bringing in depth, you could bring that in through your G League team by looking at guys who could score, who, could be a really great defensive wing to kind of fill in that gap, if KD were to ever get hurt, or if, for example, Cam Whitmore ever gets hurt. And we'll kind of talk a little bit about Cam Whitmore towards the end of this video. But, a lot of different things do factor into the Vipers, I would say, with this trade also. You also have to look a little bit at the second apron, because with Durant, he could be signing that extension, and with him signing the extension, that might mean they have to offload some depth of the Rockets to try to get below the second apron, because obviously there's a lot of restrictions when you start going above the second apron. And so if you remove some guys, like maybe one example is Jock Landale, you're removing a third string center. And so that is something you have to keep in mind, if you're the Rockets. And so you have to kind of think about who you have maybe from the Vipers, your two-way contracts. Obviously, now you don't have any draft picks in this draft. You don't have any second-round picks for the next coming years. But you still do have your first-round picks, though, and I think that's was huge also for them in this trade, getting to keep those. But I think that was a big thing, is that they might lose some depth on that bench because of this Durant trade if they're trying to get below that second apron. And so who they get from the Vipers is really important, because if they need guys to step up or call them up, that's going to be huge for next year. So now let's get a little bit into their contract situation with some of these guys. So their two-way contracts, they have Jack McVee, they have N'Faly Dante, and they have David Roddy. So Jack McVee, personally, I don't see him coming back to the Rockets. I just don't think he played a lot of minutes this year with Houston. That's just my personal guess, but we will see. Maybe he returns back to Australia. He played with Team Australia, I believe, during the Olympics. But yeah, just somebody to kind of keep in mind. But I think N'Faly Dante is a very interesting player to look at, because if you do have to move a contract like Jock Landale, do you feel comfortable giving N'Faly Dante minutes as your third string center? He did a good job, I thought, against Oklahoma City Thunder when some of the Houston team was hurt and they had to bring up like Reed Shepherd and N'Faly Dante to kind of step up, and I thought they did a good job. I'm really curious to see how N'Faly Dante he looks this summer, especially in Summer League. I'm curious if the Rockets don't bring him back, does he then go to a different team like maybe the Lakers or the Suns, who do need center options? And so N'Faly Dante and Jack McVee, they're both restricted, so the Rockets could bring them back. They do have their first rights if they do want to give them a qualifying offer. So those are two guys to look at for this summer. But David Roddy, who did sign a 2-year deal as a two-way contract player last March, he is technically going to be back next year, but technically two-way contracts are never guaranteed, so it's very possible that he does get, cut along with any of these guys. But David Roddy could be an interesting player to, fill in for the gaps if Kevin Durant ever gets hurt, because it's a trickle-down effect. So it's not like necessarily that David Roddy starts, but it's, maybe Cam Whitmore. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about Cam Whitmore later, but maybe Cam Whitmore gets more of an opportunity, and so he bumps up if Kevin Durant gets hurt. Then maybe David Roddy is spending more time with the Rockets rather than the Vipers. We saw in this Phoenix when Kevin Durant got hurt, we saw Ty Washington and we saw Jalen Bridges also end up spending more time with Phoenix rather than the Valley Suns because of the Durant injury. With Houston trading away their second round picks, they don't have, players that they could really send as much to the Vipers for development. So the importance of these two-way contract players that they get in the future is going to be even more important because they don't have, second round picks. And so that's just something more of a long-term thing, I think, for the Vipers. That'll be interesting to see how Houston, and both of them are navigating the long term. But right now for next season, I think we're going to see, it's going to be more interesting to see the options they have at center, the options they have at wing, to maybe have some extra depth. Again, this is just my thinking. We don't actually know what could end up happening. Obviously, we want Kevin Durant to stay healthy, but I think as a GM, you always also want to have flexibility of having options, having depth in case anything happens, so you're always ready. All right, so we kind of talked a little bit about the second question here, but let's get into the first question. Do the Vipers bring back Joseph Blair? Now, Joseph Blair has been an assistant coach around the NBA circle probably for the past 7 to 8 years. He has been a G League head coach previously, actually with Rio Grande Valley back in 2018 to 2019, and also was an assistant coach with the Vipers before that. What I think is really cool, though, is that he did lead the Vipers to a 2019 NBA G League championship, and he coached Isaiah Hartenstein. So just a really cool thing. I think it's awesome that they were able to bring him back next year. But, he is a popular coach as an assistant. I'd be very curious to see if he gets called up somewhere else, if he, will stay with the Vipers. I think that's just something to monitor going into this offseason. Now, the last thing I want to talk about with this trade, big question wise, is I think an important thing is Cam Whitmore. We saw Cam Whitmore play a lot in the G League his first year and his second year, and it was kind of like the first half of the season he would really play a lot. He played the Rockets Summer League team his first 2 years. I don't know if he would play his third year. I'm very curious. I don't think he will, but I don't know yet. We'll see, I guess in a week and a half. But with this Durant trade, I think with Dillon Brooks leaving, like I said, if Durant gets hurt or, any other players on that team, get hurt, he does have more of an opportunity for minutes. But Ime Udoka has said that for Cam Whitmore, he needs to stay more consistent, when he plays, in NBA games. And I think that's going to be the important thing moving forward in his career. I think this trade could really help him for sure get an opportunity now with Dillon Brooks gone. And if he gets more of an opportunity to play in time, I think that's just going to be good for him to show his value, not only with the Rockets, but if the Rockets decide they want to trade him, he could show value for other NBA teams. Like if the Rockets just decide they're still not high on Whitmore, even after this Durant trade, or maybe he gets traded this summer, if they have to get below that second apron and they have to attach him, to move him with some other guys, it's very possible. So you have to, again, continue to look at your depth, and you have to see, who do you have the rights for? So let's kind of talk a little bit about that. These are returning rights they have with Rio Grande, as you can kind of see in this list here. These are rights from their past 2 seasons that they have not traded for. Okay, of course, you see a lot of guys who you have the rights from this past season, but one player in particular I do want to talk about is Adonis Arms. Adonis Arms, he's really risen, I thought, over his past 2 years when he played in the G League. Now, he didn't play in the G League this past year, but in the first 2 years, or first 2 to 3 years he played the G League, he looked really good. I thought his numbers continue to improve. He's a JUCO player. He played D3. He's really risen up to D1, played at Texas Tech. And, he had a really good, first Summer League game with the Kings last year. I know it's just Summer League, but I just thought he looked really good. I was really expecting him to play this year with, I believe it was the Pelicans G League team, the Birmingham Squadron, but he ended up actually deciding to go overseas to play with China, and then he left and then came back. And he's been a free agent really since, I believe, February to March. So the Rockets, the Vipers, they did trade for his returning rights actually last March. And so that's something I'm curious about, whether the Rockets bring Adonis Arms onto their Summer League team this year. That's something I will be monitoring very closely. But he is somebody who maybe if, you have these extra 2-way contract spots because you don't have, any second round picks anymore, maybe he's somebody that you target for one of those two-way contract spots. Maybe if he does so well, maybe he beats David Roddy. I mean, we'll kind of find out what it's looking like this summer. But again, they have his returning rights. It's very possible they could trade his returning rights. Just something to keep in mind. And now let's talk about the Vipers draft picks. Now, the Vipers do not own a first-round pick in this 2025 G League draft, but they own a second-round pick from the Valley Suns, which I just want to be clear has nothing to do with the Durant trade. This was a whole different trade from a year ago that they actually got the Valley Suns second-round pick in 2025. And look, second-round picks in the G League draft especially, you might think it's like, does that really matter? But, you can find some guys. Like, you found like a guy like Braxton Key, who was the last pick in the G League draft, and we know he's really risen over the years. So you never know. But, it's just something to keep in mind. You can use this pick to acquire the returning rights of a player from a different G League team that you want to bring in for this year, who could be impactful for Houston. They also own their first and Asialo's 2026 first-round pick for next year, which I think is really, really huge here. Now, the one thing I will say, now with this Adonis Arms trade, I could not find, so I just want to first put that out there, that I don't know which pick out of these three that went to the squadron in return, because they didn't return the returning rights of somebody that they own. So it would have had to have been a pick if they got Adonis Arms' rights this past March. So that's just something I want to keep you all to keep in mind. But I thought I was interested to see that these are some of the things that they have coming up this off season, going into the summer league, going into the training camp this upcoming fall. The last thing is the Rockets just don't own any picks in this 2025 NBA draft because they traded their picks in this Durant trade. So that obviously means no second round pick that they can develop in the G League with the Vipers this year. Obviously, there's guys that they could target as undrafted, so we'll kind of get an idea the direction they're going after after Thursday, after the second round, because we'll start to see who they could potentially sign as a two-way contract, because we have seen them being willing to sign N'Faly Dante after the draft, so that it's possible they could sign another guy after the draft on a two-way, and they could keep that guy on a two-way contract, maybe to secure his affiliate player rights for the next upcoming year. But we'll see what they do. Last thing I want to talk about season recap. I thought this Vipers team was really good this year. They had some really great players, and like Thon Maker, who I thought was a great mentor for N'Faly Dante. I thought it was an awesome signing for the Rockets. You had like a guy like Marquise Noel, who looked really good, especially in that second stretch of the season. And then we obviously saw like Reed Shepherd, who was dropping over 40 points in the G League this past year. So just really cool to see that this Vipers team did well. We saw them make the playoffs. They obviously, they didn't make it as far as they would have hoped, but this is the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, probably one of the top G League teams in the NBA within that circle, because they've had so many championships. They've had so many big runs to the playoffs, the finals. So just really awesome to continue to see the success that they had this year. And yeah, I think that's it for this video. So if you watch this video, feel free to subscribe, like, or dislike. And this is the NBA 2K G League show. Have a great day and enjoy Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Peace.